All right, D, appreciate you joining the podcast tonight. Really looking forward to this episode. As we kind of introed earlier, we talked a bit about my very basic understanding and experience in this space. I think I've had a lot of conversations around the spirit realm with a number of different folks. Honestly, I don't know that many of them actually truly understand what they're talking about. So it's good to get around people that do know what they're talking about and have really experienced it firsthand. So I'm really excited about diving into that and a number of other topics tonight. But to start off, I'm going to run through the bio, and then we'll go from there. D. Paul is a disabled veteran who served in the U.S. Navy and is a seasoned Native American holy man, a sacred title bestowed upon him by granddaughter Crow, with a lifetime devoted to spiritual service. D. Paul has investigated and cleansed an untold number of haunted properties, encountering everything from mischievous poltergeists to dark entities so powerful that his own life has been placed in danger on more than one occasion. His work has brought physical, spiritual, and emotional healing to people afflicted by dark attachments, malevolent energies, and even possession. D. Paul is more than a medium, rooted deeply in his Native American heritage and guided by his Christian faith. He walks a unique spiritual path as a Heyoka, a healer and seer. With a proven track record of prophecy and supernatural insight, D. Paul's work bridges the seen and unseen, the sacred and the mysterious. A storyteller at heart, D. Paul considers himself a vessel, a hollow bone through which great spirit speaks. His books are more than just stories. They are spiritual messages guided by ancestral wisdom and whispers by what he calls his true ghostwriter. Each narrative unfolds before him like a vision, revealing its course on the pages of his books. Your mission is very clear. It's to help others, to battle darkness, and to be a light in troubled times. If you've experienced phenomena like those in mysteries at the Wyndham Inn, if you believe your property is haunted or feel a dark presence within yourself, D. Paul may be able to help you. So really looking forward to diving into this. D, I'm just going to start here. Well, as it relates to your background, your Indian culture and your Christian faith, this is one of my biggest questions, so I just want to jump right into it. Do they collide at all? Do they clash at all? Is there any clashing of your Christian faith with your work as a Heyoka?
Christian, thanks, Christian. Cameron, thanks so much for having me on your show. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Right. Answer your question. It's never been a conflict for me. It's just a conflict for others, if you will. Never been a problem for me.
Why is it such an issue for others? Because kind of as I mentioned before, I love diving into the spiritual realm. There's so much that's unseen there. It seems like in Bible study, in church growing up, we didn't talk about these things, right? They were kind of mentioned a little bit, but we didn't really dive deep into the demons and the devil and the things that actually come about in the unseen and the unknown. So why is it such an issue for people?
Why is it such an issue? What?
An issue for people, you think?
Well, why don't you tell me, Cameron? Why do you think it's an issue? You seem to have a pretty good foot inside the faith, you know. So why don't you tell me why Christians seem to have such a challenge with this?
It's a great question, and that's really what I'm trying to figure out as well. And I say this too from analyzing and watching a lot of different folks over the years, a lot of different pastors and a lot of different faith leaders who proclaim to have a really good understanding of what is actually going on, but I've never actually, to your point earlier, done the work. And I think I've heard you say on other podcasts as well, like you've done a lot of this. This is the area that you live in and you exist in constantly. So I think a lot of people just don't have a good understanding of it, is maybe the reason why people have such a hard time understanding, the two of these going together. When we talk about the spiritual realm, we talk about demons, we talk about all these things. A lot of times people talk about Catholics have their exorcists, right? But why can't we talk about it in other religions? Why can't we as Christians talk about it as well?
Do Catholics have their exorcists? It seems to me that the Catholic Church says not to acknowledge demons or dark energy. Right? Is that true or no?
I don't believe that's true. I've watched a lot of exorcist shows and lots on exorcisms in general, and this seems as though the Catholics themselves, those that do follow exorcists, are actually Catholic. Those that are exorcists have to be Catholic, supposedly. Not sure that's true. This is, once again, there's a lot of questions I have tonight, so I'm very interested to know kind of your background and dive deeper into this.
So I've bumped up against this my entire existence. My grandfather was ripped off the reservation and dumped into a boarding school, and beaten over the head with the Bible, and he had enough. Jumped reservation or jumped to school and claimed he was white, joined the Navy, and had a great life. Okay, and to the best of my knowledge, enjoyed his faith on both sides of the fence. Right. Because what most folks don't understand about my position on Native American belief, okay, the Trinity, Father, Son, the Holy Ghost. Listen, I was running around in my community, before Jesus stepped foot in, in Israel, right? Okay, so at the end of the day, if you strip out the power, the money, the influence from those in organized religion, and break it down to its bare bones, okay, get rid of all that crap that screws up men, right? That's what I believe in. That's at the heart of what I believe in. Okay. Nature has no bills and no money to cash or exchange. Okay. So the natural world is a whole place in and of itself, right? Where do people go to find peace? They go on vacation, they go to the beach, they go into the woods, they climb mountains. Okay. Well, that's all part of my spiritual faith, is connecting with all the energies that are part of what makes up our existence. Okay. So what is it for, a Christian, right? Listen, that's up to you, not me. One of the things people have the hardest time understanding is I don't badmouth religion, right? I say all organized religion is good and all organized religion is bad. It's up to you to pick through what works for you, what resonates, and what doesn't. I'm not the kind of guy that's going to sit down and have somebody tell me how the world works. It's not how I was built. It's just not who I am, right? So if you read the Bible, it's got more contradictions than, you got two guys that can argue about the same sentence for forever. Okay. So I've always asked, what's the end game? What's the point? Right? What's the point? Okay. So for me, my Native Americanism and my Christian faith, I married my wife, Irish Catholic. Okay. I was around the Catholic Church when I was in the military. I was 17 years old, on my dog tags, Catholic, right? So I've been around the Catholic faith my entire existence, but I've also been a Native American, and I picked my path on in both directions. Okay. When people tried to force certain things in the Christian world down my throat, I just ignore them, walk away. There's no point in it. Right. Right. People got to figure out their own path.
One of my closest friends growing up currently works for a church, but we've been having a lot of these conversations as of late too, because of his personal frustrations with the church as an organization, and some of the things that were kind of forced upon him that seemed like major contradictions. But he came to understand a lot of these things later on in life, and has continued to understand them more and more. And the more conversations we have, the more intrigued both of us come with the work that you do in the spirit realm, and understanding the things that are actually going on. So with that being said, I'd like to kind of just dive into what got you started in this realm in the first place. Obviously, you grew up with this heritage, but what got you started really going down this path of doing the cleansings and focusing on the spiritual realm as much as you have?
God, Great Spirit, the baby Jesus. Same thing with my writing. I had no interest in writing, but baby Jesus just kept hammering me upside the head until I finally conceded and said, fine. And actually it was a come to Jesus day when I kind of looked at it and said, all right, I got two choices here. I've done enough to piss off the baby Jesus, so, I better start writing because I don't want to answer for these. And I, in hindsight, my reluctance, I understand my reluctance because I didn't want to tell my story, but that's why I'm here, to tell my story, right?
Right.
I should say stories.
Absolutely. How many books have you written at this point?
So I've probably got a dozen or two written in the computer. They just sit there. All right. I've got my fourth one's coming out here, probably end of this year, early January. But I started out writing one of the toughest books anybody will ever kind of write or maybe read. It's talks about my childhood and massive, massive abuse and how I survived all that, and the conflicts that came along with it, and takes you up to the age of 14. Book 2 on that series coming out early next year. But it was a tough write. It was a tough thing to write. Telling your story is not easy, but it is rewarding in a sense of, it gets it off your soul, off your spirit, and put it out there. And it's stunning how many people my books have helped and entertained, because I tell the stories like Mysteries of the Wyndham Men. It's true, okay, but for the most part, it's kind of a paranormal story. But again, it has all the hallmarks of my faith wrapped in almost every page.
Right. I love these conversations because it's not like you and I have spoken 10 times before coming into this. We've now spoken once. We had a brief intro before the call. And we had some emails back and forth. But this really gives us an opportunity to dive into some of those things without me really knowing you at a deep level. So definitely excited about diving into a lot of those different areas. With your story and your upbringing, can we go there for just a little bit to kind of give people a better understanding of where you come from, and then we'll go from there.
2,442 steps to crazy. All right. The reason the title is 2442 is that's the number of steps it took from this place I was at to where I had to get back to this house that I was theoretically being raised in. But that it takes the reader through what happens when a stepfather enters the picture who is wrapped in evil, and is hell bent on his way or the highway, and brutality doesn't stir his pot any remorse or regret or any of that. Right. This guy's crazy, just flat out insane. And that's why I say steps to crazy.
When did you technically become a Heyoka? At what point in your life did you go down that road of becoming truly a Heyoka? And what does that process look like, I guess?
So the process is my whole life. I'm born a Heyoka. If anybody from where my position is, I tell you what I see, what I am. I don't worry about what other people think. Okay. Most people don't understand what a Heyoka is, but I was born with it. It's a gift that I've possessed since, my first memories. And it's something that I can't shake loose or wiggle away from. It is truly a part of who I am.
So what is a Heyoka, just to help people understand what that is?
Well, a Heyoka is somebody that makes everybody else uncomfortable or extremely comfortable. Depends on who they are, right? I can walk into a room with 20 people in that room from the time I was born to today, okay? In that room with 20 people, 10 of them will instantly hate me, fear me, resent me, want to fight me. 10 of them will love me, okay, period. And I've never met any of them, all right? The way I am, the energy that emanates from me calls out your soul, okay? People can't lie to me. They may occasionally, they may get away with it, okay, but they can't. So take all the things that you don't want anybody to know, right? Put me with that person and they will freak out. I mean, freak out internally, and they won't know why, right? Because when my soul gets around people like that, they panic because they know that I can see what and who they are. Remember that passage where Jesus says, you're not welcome here, unclean spirit, right? That's what it feels like. I'm not comparing myself to Jesus. I'm comparing me walking into a room to Jesus saying, you're not welcome here, unclean spirit. Because that's what happens when I, get around people, whether it's over the internet or in person, right? When I see them, I can see what's around them. I can see darkness in them. And I can see attachments to them. And more times than not, when I get close enough to these people, their dark attachments will kind of run from them. All right. They won't go too far, but they'll flip from either inside of them or stuck to them to the outside, their energy field around them. Now that's part of who I am. But again, A Heyoka is somebody who will ride through historically would ride through the tribal village backwards on a horse. It's an example that's kind of written into history, right? But I've never been one of the herd. I've always been a black sheep, and I can see things and understand things in ways that most people don't. No matter what somebody says, I'm constantly seeing the other angle, or I need to know why. It's like, why? Why did Jesus say, "You're not welcome here, unclean spirit"? Right? And then I go search out and find the answers. The answers for myself. The answers that reflect well for me may not reflect well for you.
Right.
So to close that, as a Heyoka, I'm constantly challenging people to get outside their own box and look at things differently.
So I'm just going to go there, and I'm going to do it at this point in the conversation, because I feel like waiting till the end doesn't really do us much service or do it justice at all. But when you got on the call with me, what was your initial thought, feeling, vibe when we got on the call? Because I'll be completely honest with you. I felt like there was this interesting wave of like not understanding, a little bit of confusion. I was like, I don't really know where to take this conversation immediately. I was a little bit, not timid.
On your heels.
A little bit on my heels, 100%. Now,
timid.
Now in the conversation.
Overwhelmed.
Yeah. But
way too much energy moving around. You can't understand what's going on. And you're confused.
And I don't typically get that, ever. So, and I typically know the right question to ask, and I know which direction to take things in. I was like, I don't actually know which direction we're going to go with this right now. And as much as I thought I had prepared and wanted to, like, I'm a little bit confused as to where we're going to take this. So what did you see? Because right now I'm actually a lot more relaxed in our conversation, because now I feel like I've got to know you just a little bit better. I'm a bit more relaxed, but I'm curious to know what you still see.
I'm not going to tell you on an open recorded conversation.
Okay. Understood.
Okay. I had a podcast recently. I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
And he asked me about something he saw, and I had to tell him an answer that I had to walk back. Okay. Because there are things that I will not discuss in certain settings.
Understood.
Okay. So know this, you're doing fine. Okay. But if you want me to do what, the mediums call a reading, that's a whole different conversation. And I have to do some things, but right now I'm in kind of podcast mode.
Yeah.
Not watching the energy around you.
Yeah.
Or as your friend from France said, the stuff he takes photographs of.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. I just thought I'd go ahead.
Let me turn this around. Okay. Why were you off balance? Why would such a guy with such confidence in himself all of a sudden have his heart racing, and he can't understand why, and he's having a mild panic attack when he doesn't know what a true panic attack is? Why is that, Cameron? Why did it happen to you?
I've had panic attacks before, but I also had a couple of glasses of wine last night, so that probably doesn't help at all in this conversation. But I think ultimately, I don't know. That's a great question. I really don't know. I'm not going to give you a BS answer either. I think I really don't know. And
So what happens if I say something that rattles your cage?
Like, then we're going to keep the conversation going. It's that these conversations are supposed to be.
You asked about you. You asked about you.
Right.
So I know the answers, and that's the part that frustrates the bloody snot out of people. Okay, but I'm going to go back to the Bible. Right? How many people ate fish when Jesus showed up one day? Was it 5,000 people were hungry? Right.
Right.
Okay. How many people showed up the next day for food? 5,000, and they all brought their friends. Right. Nobody went fishing.
Yeah.
You see the lesson?
So are you teaching people to do the work is really the focus here? Yeah.
Everything I can do, you can do.
Right.
Okay. You just have to do the work. Can you do it tomorrow? Nope. Okay. Can you clear people and heal them? Yes. Can you do it tomorrow? Sure. To what level? Listen, if you practice it every single day, just like everything else, you're going to get stronger. Right?
So where does someone start? I guess that's a better question. Where does someone start in this process?
again, that's like, you got to tell me, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I know my starting points on certain things. Okay. And there's certain things that are just things I've been born with. Okay. So they started long before, my life here started. Right. But yeah, the most important thing I can do is help people help themselves and teach them as much as I can. Now, does that mean people are going to go remove dark energies from, people and places tomorrow? No, I would caution against it,
Right.
but it doesn't mean you can't be a participant in it. Okay. Can people? Yes. But, it's a risk. Okay. It's like playing with the Ouija board, right? You don't set sacred space and dictate what you're looking for. You've opened yourself up to whatever the hell's out there, whatever's passing by, if you will. Right.
Right.
So the point I'm trying to get at is to get you to understand why, because I can tell you the answers. Okay. But will they resonate with you? I don't know. 5,000 people showed up for fish, and then the next day they brought their friends expecting to be taken care of. Okay.
Understood.
Study it.
Understood. What's the most terrifying thing that you've encountered, or what? I really don't like the most terrifying thing, but what are some of the terrifying things that you've encountered, just to kind of give people a better understanding of what it is that you do encounter on a daily basis?
So I sent you a snapshot of what somebody sent me.
Yep.
Okay. And this black sludge gets wrapped around people. And I write about this in my books in book 2 of the Mysteries at the Wyndham Men. Okay. It talks about this grumpy old man who's just negative and angry and spiteful, and all he does is grumble. All right. Well, he happened to be spouting off at the wrong place at the wrong time, and a piece of darkness picked up his energy and tracked him, grabbed the hold of his foot, climbed up his leg, just like that photograph I showed you, or that AI generated image. Forgive me. Okay. That image was sent to me, and it's all crusted all the way up to his neck, and he's reaching out as his last resort. Well, ironically, I wrote about this in book 2, and here this guy sends this to me saying, "This is what I see happening to me." Well, that's what I do. I go out there and take that crap, that darkness off of people. And it's, I mean, I don't want to say it's easy for me, but it doesn't bother me. Once you understand fear, and why we fear, right? Because when I was, young, I was terrified of ghosts and visions and all the things I would see, darkness, right? And feeling, anger and hatred and all that at a very raw level. Okay. But once I kind of got used to that, and understood it, once I understood what a poltergeist was, and how, the difference between clear, white energy and dark energy and so on and so on, my fear went away. And then it pretty much made it, it will never return in this sense. The only time I was truly terrified in the last couple of decades, okay, was when it's probably a few decades now, right? Anyway, when I was having one of my why God moments, why, my faith was in the toilet, all right, and I'm trying to figure out this Native American path and Christian path and all these things, because there is a lot to it, all right. And I said I had enough. I was tired of seeing all this. I was tired of seeing people's, with disease and so on and so on. And I made the mistake of, and I'm going to pause for a second and say, Great Spirit, I am telling a story. I am not asking anybody to leave. So wrap your light around me and keep me safe. So I'd had enough. And I said to my spirit guides and all the positive energy around me, I said, okay, you understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying not to use the words because
Yep.
I don't want to.
Yep.
All right. And I can see, my gatekeeper, I can see an angel, I can see his other things. And they did this, I was literally, I could see my protection just kind of like, like a bubble splitting.
Right.
Right. And then as they backed up, and all of a sudden I was alone. And I've been alone most of my life. Okay. I never felt that alone before or since, but that was only the starting point. As my protection, my white light peeled backwards, Okay. And they didn't move that far. Okay. It's kind of like those, those television shows where you see the character kind of just zoom out, right? That's
Yeah.
what it looked like. Okay. Now I could feel all the other stuff around me, the good stuff, and I could see my guardian angel. And then in moves this serpentine black sludge of raw hate, pure evil, and absolute nastiness. I could smell it. I could taste it. I sensed it from every pore in my body. My skin felt raw, nasty. And the terror that I felt was shocking. Listen, that crazy stepfather that raised me beat me to death 2 or 3 times. When I was in the Navy, they tried to kill me a couple times. Okay. None of it really bothered me. I mean, it does, right? But not to this level. When that thing was coming across, it was eyeballing me, and I could tell its sole purpose was to capture my soul. Full stop. Didn't care about my spirit, didn't care about my body, didn't care about anything other than my soul. Now, for people who do what I do, it was a knowing. What do I mean by a knowing? For my line of work, you have to know what you're doing, and these knowings are just things you can't possibly explain. All right. So I'm doing my best to explain to you what pure, raw, evil looks, feels, tastes, smells, and senses like. But the knowing of what it was probably the worst of all. It ended every ounce of doubt that ever crept into my mind. Again, I'm not saying I don't doubt from time to time.
Right.
We all have our, oh my God, what the hell am I doing moments, right? Okay. But that was the most terrifying thing I've ever encountered. And I've bumped into a lot of stuff, from demons to tricksters to, some stuff that's in the earth and all over the place. Okay. But that was brutal.
Do you see these things? So do you see these things kind of
Yes.
immediately, or is it more so you
Yes.
have to like
Uh,
get into a state of mind to be able to
it
connect
depends.
with it?
It depends. Like when you ask me, okay, that when you ask me to look at you,
Yep.
that's a whole different thing. So if you watch, I very rarely make direct eye contact. I look at somebody's nose, their mouth, or the center of their head, their third eye. Because when I look in their eyes, I can see their soul. Okay. And that's a connection that I don't want, because I don't want all the noise.
Yeah.
Okay. So, when I go to a place and I've got to do work, for me, it takes me time to acclimate. My wife walks in and she can tell you in a blink of an eye, okay, if there's something there that's good or evil. Okay. She just has instantaneous sense. I don't. I have a hard time differentiating between evil and good. So I need somebody to tell me which spirits are bad until I can figure it out.
Got it.
All right. So anyway.
So I went to, this was my one experience really with this realm, but I went to a Reiki, quote unquote Reiki healer, and I'm not sure. I really didn't know much about it. Was just kind of curious to know what the experience was going to be like, and that individual we talked about a lot about like reincarnation and my past lives and other things. Explained a couple of what they believed to be my past lives, and I was very curious. She mentioned I was a farmer in a past life and a couple other things, but how much of that, I guess, from like a reincarnation perspective, considering some Christians, a lot of Christians, modern Christians, I guess, would consider reincarnation to be antithetical to the Bible, to the biblical teachings. And to your point earlier, and I really like your approach, is that you have your faith and you get on your path, so be it. But how do you view reincarnation? I guess is a great place for us to start with that.
A whole lot of questions in there, Cameron.
I know. I'm
So
thinking as I'm asking it, I'm like, I want to get to reincarnation specifically, but I want to explain my experience with discussing reincarnation as well. But I'm just interested to know your experience with reincarnation and what your beliefs really are on reincarnation.
So reincarnation, yes.
Okay.
Our soul is here to learn. Full stop. And if you look around at people like me, they say people like me have old souls. Okay. I would agree. Right. I mean, So yeah, I spent a lot of time learning and understanding reincarnation. Okay. I want to just point something out. Reiki is kind of an energy healing thing that uses, successions, lines of folks that are out there kind of channeling their energy.
Yeah.
Right. Again, I think it started in Japan, and if my memory's right, started in Japan. And, there's people that are speak highly of it, and there's people that'll kibosh it. And I've seen people that have kiboshed it and then turned around a few years later and said, you know what? I jumped to the gun too early. Okay. So in the native community, if you wanted to heal, you created a healing circle and you surrounded the tent, the village, whatever it is. Okay. The Hogan, wherever that ill person was or ill family, and everybody prayed, right? And drew energy in and sent it to whoever needed it. Okay. I'm a big believer in that. Right. I mean, look at the Jews. I mean, if my understanding is correct, they don't believe in heaven. Okay. I also think they don't. I also think they don't believe in reincarnation. Again, I don't know a lot about the Torah and that kind of thing, but my discussions lead me to believe that. Okay, I was on the horn with an atheist, and that's it. You die, you go to the worms, and that's it. Okay, but I knew long before I was, I truly studied, and I mean studied I mean, spent all the time studying that, this isn't my first life, and it won't be my last, because I knew at a young age that all of this information that I'm gathering would be too stupid to spend a lifetime learning this crap, get old, and then forget about it and drop dead. I mean, what's the point? There has to be a bigger picture.
And do you think that reincarnation is reincarnating as animals on other planets, in other worlds, dimensions, etc., or is it just reincarnating back to Earth?
Certain people will reincarnate on the Earth time and time again, okay, but others are from different planets, different galaxies, okay. And yes, if you study karma and you understand, or you study the soul and the Akashic records and all that stuff that kind of goes along with it, right? Without New Wave, I'm not a fan of the things they call New Wave. Right? Again, I'm not disparaging anybody, because the more you learn, the more you move forward, right? Okay, so I'm sorry, I lost myself, Cameron. What the hell are we talking about?
Talking about reincarnation, because whenever I watch videos on
Yes, and I dropped it at animals. Yes,
Yep.
it is my belief, okay, and my understanding that we as souls have to spend at least one time as every race, every gender, every animal, okay, so that you understand the essence. Now, let me bring this one up. When I was young, apparently there was a thing called the women's lib, right? Couldn't tell you much about it. Didn't pay much attention to it. Okay, right. When my wife and I hooked up, we were never anything but equal. Okay, and through my years, we'd watch this stuff about women's rights and all this stuff, and I look at her and I say, "Baby, did I ever treat you like this?" She goes, "Nope." I go, "Did I ever treat you anything but an equal?" She said, "No." All right, now this is, as I say, we've been together 50 years with the wind chill. Without the wind chill, it's more like 37, I think. Okay, but where does that come from in someone like me, right? I've never put my hands on a woman in anger in my life, in my existence. Just haven't. Now, is that because I watched the abuse going up? Probably. Okay, but I know others that went through what I do, and they just follow in those footsteps. So is that one soul's life able to capture and understand all these things? No. I believe that I was this way when I was born. Okay. Now that leaves the question: is it taught, or is your soul in there? Right? How do two? And I'm not going to get into a political conversation, but how do two conservative parents give birth to a flock of liberals, and vice versa? And then how come grandparents relate to grandchildren and vice versa so much better than parents? I mean, you can lose your mind thinking this thing out, right? So where do you draw the line, and where do you draw your own conclusions?
Do the people that reach out to you and say, "Hey, I need some help," or "I'm looking for answers," and then invite you in, is there a certain kind of person, or are they just all different kinds of individuals that end up reaching out? at the end of the day.
You got to clarify a little more. Reaching out for what?
Reaching out for help, conversations. You know, you're going to do a cleansing. They think their house is haunted. They think there's something going on with them spiritually. They're looking for support or just guidance in general. To those people that you talk to, are they kind of every single kind of person, or is it a certain kind of person?
Usually when they get to me, they're either Usually when they get to me, they're either suicidal or in the the grip of something dark that they're in serious trouble. Okay, folks that and I can give examples for days.
Yeah.
Okay, folks that aren't far enough down the wrong road, there's plenty of folks out there that can help you out and do what you need to do. Okay, if they're looking for general advice, I'm always doing, I'm always helping.
Got it.
Okay, but for the heart of what I do, I'm here to be a messenger. Okay, I'm here to help people. I'm here to pass things along and say things that they don't want to hear. Okay, so this is I have this standard rule. If you don't want to know, don't ask. Because if you ask me, I'm going to tell you. And I've had that policy with my wife since day one. If you want to know, ask. If you don't want the answer, then don't ask. Okay? I'm going to give you an example of that. Let me not. We'll do that later. I kind of forgot where you're going with this.
Okay.
Did I answer your question, by the way, Cameron?
It does. I was more so I think more so just being like, okay.
And go back. Listen, if I don't answer your question, go back to it. I do not want to be evasive. I want to and will answer the questions. Yeah, no, I just get lost in my own head.
This is more so like certain kind of people like gravitate, right? Like young men might gravitate towards you, right? Certain people hear your message. I guess that was more so my question. Like, is there a certain kind of person that gravitates towards you that you found?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
No, listen, I don't really have any friends. Okay. I hang out. I have my wife. Okay. I'm not a people person. I'm not. Okay. How are you going to have a conversation over wine? I'm not a drinker anymore, but how are you going to have a conversation with me over wine? What are we going to talk about?
Well, I'm going to ask you a lot of questions about this kind of stuff because this is what intrigues me.
Okay. Then we can have a conversation. Yeah. Right. But if we're not talking about these things, then I don't have any interest in people.
Yeah. I think it's maybe why I started the podcast too. I kind of lost interest in sports and other things and was interested in learning about things that I don't know. I don't truly understand, which is why I started this in the first place. Kind of a searching.
Now you need to write that down. No, I mean, you need to write that down.
This is why
you need to write that down and study what you just said. Okay?
Will do.
You keep giving yourself your own answers. Many of us do. We just don't know how to listen to ourselves. Okay? Do you know how rare it is for somebody to lose interest in all the things they've had interest in their whole life? You're staring at them. Okay? And you're going down that path. You're just doing it a lot faster and more aggressively.
I appreciate you saying that because it feels like it, but I don't really know how to explain that. If that makes sense.
You're being fast tracked to do great things.
Well, that's good.
Let me say that again. Oh, really? Okay. Remember you said that. Mark this tape. Okay. People look at me and they say, "Man, how cool it is to have your gifts." I say, "All right, let me tell you a little story. I have a dream log." Okay. In that dream log, 3 years and 6 months ago, I had a dream. Wake up, I go to write it down when I'm having an argument with me, God, the baby Jesus, my gatekeeper, my guardian angel, and every spirit out there. And I said, this can't be true. All I heard was silence. I didn't want to write it down. Wrote it down, crossed it out. Wrote it down, crossed it out. And then finally said, fuck. I wrote it down, put my head back. That was 3 years, 6 months ago. 6 months ago, it came true. And I mean true. You want to know what that dream was?
Do I want to know?
My wife had cancer.
Wow.
3 years and 6 months ago, I had the dream that my wife will have cancer. 6 months ago, she was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer, non-curable. Spent 3 years not saying a word. So anybody thinks that what I do is a gift or is fun, look, we can call it a gift. but it comes with an enormous amount of responsibility. Now I'm going to tip my hand. I know the outcome of my wife, and I'll never say it out loud, but it's written down. Now that's the tough side of what I do, but the spirit world showed me that for a reason. Don't fully understand the reason, probably preparing me for something, preparing me for this battle, right? To help her, to be a better healer, right? How would you like to walk around with those type of visions?
I think it'd be difficult. Right? It'd be very difficult.
So when I say it's a lot of work, it's a lot of work. If I could tell you right now how much energy I'm channeling, I'm starting to sweat. Okay? And that's solely because there's a pretty good connection between you and I spiritually. Okay? And there's a lot of light being moved to you and spiritual connections being made for you. I don't understand them. I'm just listening.
I don't understand. I want to that point. I'm trying to better understand. And I keep coming back to this question too, of when you mentioned this as your gift, this is what, this is the gift this is your ability. When did you realize that you had this ability? Because this particular vision came to you, but when did you realize? And I know you mentioned you go back to birth. You've had this since birth, but when did you really realize it?
Can you see all the interference?
There is interference. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Crazy, huh? I'm moving a lot of light here, Cameron. So my first podcast I ever did a number of years ago, right? The girl asked me, "What's your first memory of being alive?" And I thought for a second, and I said, "Being thrown across the room with my arm almost ripped out of its socket, hitting the side of the couch and breaking my ribs." I think I was 3. Maybe I was 4. Okay. And I said it matter of fact, just like that. Okay. The poor girl started crying. Right. And I'm like, "Terry, what the hell happened?" She's like, "That's not the answer she was looking for." I said, "Okay." All right. The same day, I remember seeing the darkness around this crazy bastard. Okay. Same day. So from the day I can first remember, I remember. Heyoka, the term came much later in life, but I could stand toe to toe, at the age of 5, 6 and on with this crazy bastard, and I wouldn't back down. Right. And I would tell him what I see, and it would piss him off. Okay. Now imagine being 6 and seeing this spirit next to this crazy guy. Okay. Yet this spirit is in a white dress with blood all over and knife holes. And she's constantly pointing at him saying, "Murderer." Right. So that's some of the first things that I had to deal with for who I am. Right. But it's always changing, mutating, if you will. All right. Give you another example that's, a little less cancerous. Right.
Yeah.
About 10 years ago, was it 10 years? Oh, God, no. I got a 40-year-old daughter now. Got to be 20 years ago, I guess. 20 years ago, my daughter was playing softball in Florida. So a friend of mine, guy I grew up with, drove down, right? I'm in his truck. Beautiful, F-350. And we're tooling right around the Georgia-Florida line, one of those 90-lane highways, right? And I'm chilling out in the passenger seat, and all of a sudden the message comes in, you need to move this truck over immediately. So I looked in front of me and I could see what was coming. Well, Dave was behind this tanker truck, gasoline truck. Okay. And now we're tooling. We're not going slow. And I just look over at Dave and I says, that truck's about to have a very bad problem. You need to move over now. And he just slowly looks over at me and I snap back at him. I've never raised my voice at him in my life. I looked at him. I said, "Move over now." Okay. And he just shifted. And as soon as he got out of that wall, that tanker truck just jackknifed. Okay. And I just looked at him. I said, "Punch it." And he slapped that thing. And the tires were blowing. It was already doing 70 or 80 miles an hour behind the truck, right? Well, maybe 65, whatever. But, that's an example of, visions that I get just, anytime, anywhere. So, of course, as we go by, there's just a nasty wreck on the highway. And he looks at me and he goes, "How the fuck did you know that?" It's a gift. What do you say? Right?
Yeah.
Here's the funny part. few years later, we went fishing out of Texas, right? We fly out to Texas and, rent a man truck, and they put us in a minivan. Can you imagine two manly men in a minivan in Texas? That was embarrassing.
I did it with a group of 6 guys in college on a little drive across the country.
College and a Navy warrior and another guy like Dave, big time hunter, manly men, right? Anyway, we're on the highway and heading into, where were we heading into? Galveston, I think. And he said something, and I just had a feeling, and I says, Dave, you need to move over, man. And he didn't even hesitate. He swung, and as soon as he did, I didn't even see it. This truck came flying in behind him and rear-ended the people in front of us. Okay, again, punched it and went. He had some questions then. I had to spend a little bit of time talking to him, but he's more of an atheist than a believer. So it's always interesting.
Do you think it helps though? Like when people, because people, you're a believer. When you're able to talk to people about these things that are not believers, and you share these experiences, do you think it helps them to start going down the right path, or do you think it confuses some people even more?
Well, confusing is definitely something that happens. Okay, I've said things to you that have you kind of confused, right? And again, just the energy that I bring to the table offers that kind of thing. So, yeah, but I work under under this, cause no harm, cause no interference, all right? So for me, I don't, this Long Island medium, she goes around and talks to people and tells them all this stuff. That's what she does. I don't. If I tried to start doing that, okay, I'd be, spiritually reprimanded. All right, it's just not what I'm supposed to do. In fact, the spirit world has to fight with me at times to go tell people certain things. There's one of them on my mind right now that I can't, spirit world won't let it go, so I'm going to have to. Actually, there's a couple of them. Give you another example. When I was 14 and living in a cemetery, I thought a cemetery would be a safe place, right? Only dead people would be there.
14 and you were living in a cemetery.
Yeah, when you read Steps to Crazy, you'll understand why, because there was, the cops were coming through the door, and that was it. I was homeless after that. I was on my own. So I picked a cemetery to go live in, right? Mainly because I understood the spirits and I was comfortable with them, all right? And there are no people. Who's crazy enough to go in a cemetery after dark, right? Nobody. Well, apparently there were some other people that went and, I didn't lose the fight, but I ended up in a hospital. So after that, a family took me in, and, long story short, 5 decades later, I don't know at the time, maybe it was 4 decades later. Yep. The father, who was a Marine, okay, was having troubles, right? And the spirit world kept saying to me, you need to go pray with him. And I knew what they wanted me to do, okay? They wanted me to cross him over, right? They wanted me to help ease his transition from this life to the next. And I fought the spirit world for a week, 10 days, 2 weeks. I really don't remember, but it just kept getting louder and louder and louder and louder until I finally, my poor wife, she's like, man, I don't know what you're struggling with. When I finally told her, she's like, oh, geez. So we get in the car and we drive, and for me, it's a very quiet ride. All right. And we get there and I see him and I'm holding back my tears because I know what's coming. And my wife, the greatest person on this planet, right? Just spends the time talking to him. We were there for a couple hours. And half of the time I just had his hands in mine, and we were sitting down and I was, praying, talking and seeing what was going on.
Right.
And I could see, the forces coming to get around him. Okay. And then I couldn't take it anymore. And I said, it's time for me to go. The energy was just too much. It was time for me to pull out. Yeah. And I looked at him and I said, thank you. Okay. And he smiled. We left, hand to God. We didn't even get down the hallway and the bells and alarms went off. Okay. And he died the next day. He gave enough time for his family to come see him, and he died the next day. He was 72, 73 years old. Okay. No, wasn't sick. Wasn't dying of cancer, nothing. It was just his time to go. And he made the decision. I've had enough. Okay. And that's it. He needed to let some things go, and I needed to help clear some things out. There's another person out there right now. I've got to go see him, and I'm procrastinating because it's not easy. I know what I've got to do, and it's important for me to go and help clear these, pieces. And sometimes, gotta be careful how I say that. Sometimes, kind of like when priests do last rites.
Yep.
In my mind, I can see priests doing last rites, and what they're doing is they're chipping away the darkness that sticks to people throughout their lives. It collects over a lifetime. Okay. If you don't do enough spiritual work, you're not a perfect vessel. So, you may be in a little bit of fight to get your soul back to the other side. Okay. But again, it's nothing like I've ever listened to in the churches and so on. I've never seen anything that the churches tell me about. I just don't. And I've crossed enough over to have an opinion. Whether my opinion's right or not, who knows? It's my opinion.
You mentioned being reprimanded earlier.
Yeah, I just got barked at again.
So that's pretty consistent. You
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, all of this is matter of fact to me.
Yeah.
Okay. Having faith is not an option. I've had faith since I can remember. I've lost my faith, but I never surrendered it. I never gave up,
right,
except for that one moment. Okay. And I needed that lesson so that I can be where I am today. Right. When I've got to go do battle with, some dark forces, the people that advise me, the people that I talk with to help protect me, they fear for me because I don't have any fear of the darkness. Again, you see that raw crap coming at you.
Right.
It's a different level, right? You go through the Citadel college. Look at these other people that went to college, those college boys. It's not the same school.
Yep.
Okay. You go through boot camp, you're a different person. I love to say this. They tell veterans to go back to being a civilian. Really? Wouldn't it be easier for a parent or a mother to stop being a mother? Listen, your kid's 18. You did your job. Okay. Give him 20 and then retire your kid. You're no longer a mother. How does a mother stop being a mother? You can't.
You don't. Yeah.
Right? No. How's this for ramblings from an old guy?
No, this is great. And the thing that comes to mind, I've been having this conversation a lot with that particular friend that I mentioned earlier about the church and about pastors in particular. But you mentioned mediums. I'm going to connect the two of those. A lot of people do spiritual work for financial gain, for huge financial gain. And one of the biggest frustrations that we've had is with like large, what I would refer to as like mega church pastors, right? That blow up, and a lot of them end up getting what seems like arrested anyways for some kind of fraud of some kind at some point, if they are truly negative. But there seems to be this interesting intersect of like capitalism and the spirit realm, and it almost, for me, seems to destroy like the work that's being done in the spiritual realm when people start doing it for like huge financial gain. Now, I'm not saying that's absolute. I'm just saying that I feel a lack of connection to people that do spiritual work and do it 100% and seem to be doing it for the financial gain. So what is that? What have you seen in this realm for people that seem to be doing spiritual work, but ultimately are in it for the financial gain? Because that in of itself destroys the trust that people have in certain kinds of work, like a Reiki or a medium or a pastor or whoever it is. But when there's a lot of money tied to it, it seems to destroy the actual spiritual connection. So how do you, what do you see that? Like, I'm trying to ask the best question here. So I'm gonna take a second. I've actually never done this before. I'm gonna take a second and ask this better. But how do you approach that from a financial perspective? Is it incorrect to do this work and assume financial gain, or is it okay to do the spiritual work and experience the financial gain as a result of doing the spiritual work?
So one thing I won't do is bash religion or other folks who do what they do. Okay, I don't know their path in life. I don't know, why they're here and what they're supposed to accomplish. So my opinion has no value.
Got it.
Go back to this. Okay, power in religion. Okay, you lose the message.
Yep.
Why did you say capitalism? I mean, capitalism's only been around for a couple hundred years.
Not necessarily capitalism. I think I'm more so.
Oh, you said capitalism. I was wondering why.
Yeah,
You
I
said
think
capitalism versus, or you said capitalism.
the more so like the spread of the church, right? Like the expansion of the church and the now 40,000 different sects of Christianity, the expansion of the church, the expansion of the Catholic Church, etc. I've been watching a lot of like individuals as of late that go down this path of being very critical of the growth of the church into, okay, we need to have more money tithed to be able to get another building or to get a private jet or to go on these trips, etc. And what used to be like doing spiritual work now seems like expanding the franchise of sorts. And
Yeah, I don't pay that much attention to it, Cameron.
okay,
I've never asked for $1 to heal somebody, clear somebody, cleanse somebody, remove darkness from them. And to the best of my knowledge, I never will. Okay.
right.
Never crosses my mind, never enters it.
So that's why this seems a lot more authentic, right? Because if I go to a medium and I pay them $200, they'll probably say whatever they need to, and it feels like they'll probably say whatever they need to in order to provide for themselves. But in your situation, you're providing spiritual guidance and support without necessarily the financial gain, I guess. So it just feels more real. Let's put it that way.
Well, it feels more real because I'm closer to God than most people are. It feels more real because I spent a lifetime putting myself into this position. It feels more real because I've been through every single story I've ever told somebody. The stories are real. Okay. Even the stuff in the Mysteries of the Wyndham Inn, publishers want to call it, fiction. It's not. Okay. It's as real as it gets. Okay. Believe it, don't believe it. It doesn't matter to me. I understand where you're going with this, and that's part of your struggle, is you're trying to figure this out. As for mediums charging money, listen, man, these folks got to eat, right?
Yep.
If you were born a white witch, right, a Wiccan, and I know quite a few of them, okay, they can be great healers, especially those who understand the earth and herbs and roots and all of those things that were prominent until Rockefeller came along, and the government broke up his monopoly in the oil fields, and he got pissed off and cabaged by Congress, anybody doing herbal healing as a kook. Okay. So, cast these folks into the shadows. They've got to eat somehow.
Right.
So whether they tell you what is true or not, that's between you and them.
Right. And I think that's the thing for me, is it almost seems like it corrupts the information that's being shared with you, especially if they're charging an exorbitant amount of money for the information they're about to share with you. But
so let me throw something at you. Let me throw something at you.
No.
Granddaughter Crow, Navajo Reservation. Okay, her latest book is Shamanism and Your Shadow. Okay. Right, phenomenal book, phenomenal woman. Okay, her name, Granddaughter Crow, comes from her grandfather. Okay, but her Dutch name, okay, she's part Dutch, is Doctor, and I say that again, Dr. Joy Gray. Okay, she spent a couple of decades with a PhD inside the corporate world with a degree in corporate leadership and so on and so on. Okay, she walked away from that to follow her faith. Okay, now she may use different words. Okay, but is she supposed to stop eating? She's supposed to stop having an income, right? So listen, everybody's got to do their thing, and I don't cabage anybody who's trying to move along. For me personally, I just never asked anybody for money, and I don't see I ever will.
Understood. What do people do on a daily basis that like unintentionally attracts darkness or negative energy? What are some of those things?
You identified it, right? The word negative. Okay. Most people don't understand what a poltergeist is, so let me give you my version of it. Yep. All right. A poltergeist is nothing more than a tumbleweed of negative energy. Now, where's it come from? Most poltergeists will be in somebody's house, typically in their kitchen or their living room, right? Now, the crazy part is I've seen some real dark stuff in bathrooms. Now, why? I still haven't figured that out, all right? But your living room and your kitchen are the main area that people live in, and that's the main area where people fight, mothers, fathers, right? Kids, right? Holidays, okay? And when you create energy, as science has proven, all energy just transform, it never disappears. So when you create this negative, angry, hateful energy, it goes somewhere. What I see is it lands on the floor, okay? Now do that week after week, year after year after year. That energy is just sitting there, okay? You're walking through it every day. Over time, it mutates like a single cell thing, and it becomes a little bigger, a little bigger. Nobody has ever watched a tumbleweed get formed, or they would have put it on YouTube, okay? But it starts out with a stick somewhere and then collects another stick, wind blows it, and now you got a tumbleweed, right? So when for me at least, when I understood the mechanism of a poltergeist, you know, there was a poltergeist in our house a few years ago. I went to bed and I heard this crash. I said to my wife, "Hey," and she goes, "A chunk of iron got thrown across the kitchen." I'm like, "Fuck, right? I'll deal with it tomorrow." And I did. You know, do that 30 years ago would have scared the hell out of the family because I didn't understand what it was.
What can people do to set themselves up for success and to invite in clean energy, good energy? I think you're kind
Is that a follow on to the last question that I still haven't answered, or?
It is no, it's a follow on to a certain degree, because when we unintentionally invite in this negative energy, you also want to think about how do I become more.
But hold on, let me back you up there. Unintentionally invite in those that doesn't work. Okay, you're not. You actually have to invite something in or open yourself up. So let me give you an example. When we're done with this call, I will cleanse and break all cords between us. Okay. Every time we think about somebody, we connect with them. Again, let me give you another example. I was in Connecticut, had a family down in North Carolina. I'm on the phone with somebody, and about an hour later, I start feeling something, and I'm like, "What the hell?" My wife says, "Hey, man, there's something here." Pick up the phone, call somebody, and say, "Hey, check in on me, will you?" They said, "Man, something came through a cord you were on." I'm like, "What cord?" They said, were you on the phones or something down south? And I'm going, "You got to be kidding me." All right. So when we mentally or physically connect with other people, we are truly making an energetic cord. Now, again, you don't have to believe me, but think about it. Okay. So when we're done on this call, I'll break those cords so that those connections can't happen. Now, what's the difference between an invitation and just being open? The conversation we're having now opens us up to each other. Okay. So for me, I've got a lot of protection around me so that, the reason you can't and others can't get a read on me is because you'd have to get through all my layers of protection. That's one of the reasons that people get so frustrated with me. They can't understand me. They can't connect with me. They can't get a sense of what and who I am. And that's on purpose. When I bump into people like that, I instantly know, they've got levels of protection around them, whether I can see it or not.
Well, then here's a good follow on to this. How do you break the connection?
So Archangel Michael is the most powerful archangel I've ever seen or worked with. Okay. Now, my understanding, he's got a boss somewhere between him and God, but I'm unfamiliar with that particular archangel. Right. So for me, I talk to the spirits that are around me, but I concentrate and focus with Archangel Michael as my absolute confidant. Okay. I trust that he will, if the folks around me, the spirits that are around me can't break the cords, that he will. And it's a conversation. It's just like praying. Okay. I say, Archangel Michael, please break any and all connections that are unneeded, unnecessary, or unwanted. If it is not of pure white light, break it off. If I don't need to be connected to that person or that entity, break it off. Okay. Because I can't necessarily see all the cords. Right. And I don't know who's trying to attach to me. Right. So daily, and sometimes multiple times a day, I have to break all those cords. And I just did it in a very quick, almost, I hope not flippant attitude. But to me, it's a ceremony. I do it at night. I do it in the morning. I cleanse myself with sage. Okay. And other things.
Do you, are remote viewing, have you ever remote viewed or gone down that path at all? I feel like a lot of people that
Yes.
are in this space discuss remote viewing pretty frequently as well.
I'm going to push back on a lot of people in the space do a remote viewing.
I didn't
I've
mean
only
that in a
bumped in.
disrespectful way, by the way. I meant to be people that discuss the spiritual realm, very blanket statement, openly,
Yeah.
seem to also dive into remote viewing as well.
Yeah. I actually did a number of training things on remote viewing so that I could learn not just how these folks are doing it, what they're going through, and so on, but what other people are looking at. And my intrigue came when I, a long time ago, when I found out, the military and CIA, had a long-standing remote viewing outfit. Okay, and thank God that I kept my mouth shut in my time in the military and never brought that up. The irony is, I was asked. Okay, and I just kind of I said, no, I don't see sense. I said no. And I was a kid too. But yeah, you know, but remote viewing for me um, is about connecting and finding an answer. Okay, I don't sit down and just kind of go check on somebody's living room or see what's there, and it doesn't really work that way. But you got to kind of try to focus with a purpose. But yeah, actually, and I was doing that training course with some other folks. Kind of freaked a few people out, because I was pretty accurate with it.
Well, I'd say the reason I asked that is you get all this stuff online, whether it's 3i Atlas, Project Bluebeam, aliens, whatever it is, right? And I'm constantly like, okay, well, does somebody know like what's that? Like, what is actually going on here? So
Yes,
that's my follow up question. What is this? What is actually going on?
that's a I
What
don't
are
know where to
people
begin.
when we talk about aliens and we talk about the Greys and we talk about the the Arcturians and all these different extraterrestrial beings, reptilians, etc. We talk about seeing orbs in the sky at night. What are certain individuals may believe those to be spirits or more spiritual, while others actually believe them to be physical beings from other places. So I guess that would be my question: is what do you believe them to be?
Okay, so I'm only going to touch on a couple of things.
Okay.
All right, but I'm going to ask a question of your audience.
Okay.
How old is the Earth, and how old is the universe? And do you think we're alone on this planet and there's no other planets out there? Go outside. You got to be careful. You see in the flashes?
Yep.
Okay. Go outside and look at how big the universe is, right? Every light you see in the sky, for the most part, short of a satellite and Elon Musk bouncing around out there, those are stars surrounded by what? Infinity. Okay. I remember before my first memory, okay, I remember this dream that I had, okay? Now, living memory and a dream I had. And it was the vast expanse of the universe, and it was terrifying, okay, because of how huge it was. And my whole life, I've seen that, a repeat of that dream time and time again, okay, because of the vastness of it. And I can hear the sound the universe makes. Okay, the earth has a vibration, everything has a sound. You just have to know how to listen to it or tune into it. And we don't have the hearing. A dog has hearing that can hear a lot, frequencies that we can't, right? Okay, so the earth, the universe, all has its own sound, its frequency. Okay, I mean, I watch shows where these guys, connect to leaves and listen to the frequencies of those things, right? Well, aliens. So I'm not big into aliens, but yes, I've seen them. Yes, I've tapped into them for healing. Um, you know, I've never seen a gray, never have. I mean, I've seen some spirit guides that are pretty wild, right? I mean, wild. But yeah, I've seen a couple aliens, and but that's more in my visions. And there's one that does healing when I call him in certain things.
I had an individual on the podcast that, and I say claimed to be abducted a number of times throughout his life, and so the entire time we discussed the abductions throughout the podcast and kept his name and information hidden for his own purposes and own reasons. But a lot of those stories, I think that was one of the most eye-opening kind of moments for me. I was like, these things actually, people actually experience these, and it caused me to go down a bit of a rabbit hole, which delves into aliens and other things as well. But I think everybody has
Well,
that.
again, there's so much proof out there that people that want to open their eyes and go down a path, great. Okay, there's the kid from Massachusetts who was in college in Colorado, and he disappeared, and the footprints led out onto this lake, and the footprints stopped, and he was gone, and he shows up a month later or 2 months later, 20 miles from his house in Massachusetts, right? There's a native tribe in Alaska that disappeared, the entire village. Okay, how long ago? Less than 100 years ago, right? You seen this one? You know where I'm going with this?
Yeah.
Okay, an entire Native American village. The fires were still hot. Steam was coming off the pots, and when this expedition party came over the hill, they saw the village and walked into it and recorded it all.
Right.
Okay. Actually, I think it was about 60 years ago. Okay. So where did they go? They didn't fall in a hole. The entire village, a few hundred people, they just disappeared. You know how many people disappear every year? Just disappear from their house or nowhere. Where do they go? It's a great question. It's not my focus. Okay, right. But I do bump into some of that stuff from time to time.
I think another interesting part of all this too is as I'm doing my own searching and trying to figure out certain things, I also realize there's certain things I'm just never going to fully understand, and I've come to peace with that to a certain degree. But there's so much noise out there, and there's so many people that have bad intentions. And I think the biggest thing for me and one of my biggest goals with this podcast is hopefully to lead people in a way that can help them to critically think and talk through these things, but also open up their minds as best as possible. So I asked you very early on about where people can start and how they can get into this and start this process. And I guess I want to follow up on that again and just say, if people are listening in, and I think I know what your response is going to be, but I guess we'll wait. But where should they truly start? Aside from with themselves, but where should they go for a little bit of extra guidance on all of this, in your opinion? Resources, good things to connect with, read, etc.
Yeah, so it's I'm pretty partial to some folks that I've worked with.
Okay.
Some folks that are trained by the Lakota tribe or Lakota folks, the Navajo folks, some other healers that I know. Here's what I would tell anyone that really wants to go down this path. You have to figure out what resonates with you and what doesn't, right? And just do a pro and con sheet, right? What resonates with me and what doesn't. Because what doesn't, you're going to waste a lot of time trying to figure that stuff out when it's never going to fit with you, okay? But what is it that you're looking to do? Are you trying to understand how to do healing? Are you trying to clear darkness? Are you trying to clear yourself? Are you trying to find peace? Okay? Because the word peace is what came to me a long time ago that kind of really pushed me hard into the direction that I'm in now. Right. So I was, if you take that word peace, are people looking for peace? Are they trying to find a baby Jesus? Are you trying to find, what else is out there? Right? Have you read the Bible? Have you read have you looked at Judaism or Buddha? Right? How much have you studied? Okay, because for me, I'm constantly studying, constantly. Right? The more I can learn and look at, and reading books. I mean, I never thought I would read a lot of books, but I've got so many books under my belt. It's stupid now. All right. Granddaughter Crow is a great source of one-on-one and seminars. She does some pretty good seminars, but I mean, I can't promote her enough. She really is a good people person, and she has a lot of gifts. I mean, a lot of gifts. But I'm probably not the best person, although people want me to do a lot of teaching and helping them. I'm just not that good at it. Follow your heart, follow your soul, follow your path. Okay. Again, I can talk about you because I can see that you're being fast tracked, and your ego is going to get in the way and it's going to screw things up. And then you're going to have to figure that one out. And that's going to be a big black eye. Be careful of your ego. I'm
That's
not
good to
supposed
know.
to say more,
That's good to know.
but you are being fast tracked.
Good to know. Has there ever
Yeah.
been a situation, aside from that one time, that one super uncomfortable experience, was there ever a situation where you walked into a room with an individual, or does this happen often, and you just felt incredibly uncomfortable and realized you needed to leave immediately?
So I feel that way anytime I'm around people.
Okay.
Okay. And here's why. I'm intensely sensitive. And I mean, not, give me a frowny face and I'm going to buckle up and cry. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about I feel, sense, hear, see, and know at a level that I can pick stuff up from miles away just in some place we're going. Okay. Normally it's the bad stuff. I can sense that because they don't want me there and they're doing what they can to try to keep me from doing what I'm supposed to do. But when I'm in with certain people, okay, these people don't want their secrets revealed. And when I enter any place, they feel threatened and they don't understand why. Right? I forgot the question.
Did you feel uncomfortable where you had to
So,
leave a situation completely?
you know, it, yes, for years.
Yeah.
Okay. And it took me years of training
Yeah.
to learn how to put up enough protection so that outside energy doesn't affect me the way it has in the past. Let me give you an example. 30 years ago, my wife and I were in a bar, okay, doing what, relatively young people do when they're trying to abandon their kids for a couple hours, right? So we're in this bar, it's Friday night, it's packed, hometown bar, right? My wife's next to me, and this woman with her boyfriend just kind of tries to push by me. And as she does, she brushed up against my arm. And when she did, without thinking, without even a moment to comprehend what was about to happen, snapped my neck, looked her square in the eye, and said, "Oh, you have cancer." Huh. This poor woman turned 8 shades of white. Her boyfriend was 9 foot tall, saw the look on her face, thought I said something to her. She puts her hand on him, and he, didn't go anywhere. My wife steps in, and she starts asking questions like there's no tomorrow. Okay, and I kind of got out of there, and we left shortly thereafter. Okay, that's how sensitive I am. Right, I don't like being touched because I see shit. So in order to shake hands, I have to put up enough protection so that I can't see stuff I don't want to see. Okay, but anywhere I go, if I block it out. But if I want to turn it on, give you another example. I went into a hospital to see somebody, and when the ICU door opened, okay, I turned. My wife's in front of me. I turned, and as soon as I turned, I watched these two giant puffs come out of this person. This person we were going to see. One of them backed up all the way to the far side of the ICU room, and the other one just stood right next to this person. Okay. Now, if I can do that to dark energy, what can I do to people like you when they meet me and all of a sudden everything they thought they are got thrown out the window, and now I'm kind of trying to figure out why I'm all discombobulated.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, and again, it's about understanding energy. Everything is energy. People say to me, "Can you read minds?" And I say, "Yes," but it's not reading your mind. I can read the energy of your thoughts.
Right.
Okay. So more times than not, I can tell, like I know when you want the conversation to end, and I want them, and what else you are thinking and where you want to go. That's annoying.
Well, the word ego just keeps going to mind because you mentioned that earlier. And 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, had you said to me, your ego is going to get in the way, I probably would have gotten very frustrated. Now I'm kind of like, I'm intrigued. I'm curious to know why, because I've been doing a lot of work in this area, and I've also come across ego death, and I don't really fully understand what that means, but I'm trying to understand what that means. So I'm curious to know what well what you meant by that. But I also don't think you're going to be able to give me the answer. Maybe you are. Uh, but how does one get over their ego? Truly go through an ego death of sorts? And is it a
So I
good?
have
Is
the
it a good
answers.
thing? So
I have the answers, but I'm not gonna discuss it openly.
okay, understood. Understood. Is there anything else that you want to plug tonight? We have shared the books. We briefly.
Well, hold on. Let's back up and get on that ego.
Okay.
Okay. What you just said about your ego, I don't know anything about it. Okay, but it doesn't surprise me because I keep hearing he needs to keep his ego in check. Okay. I didn't know you were having an issue with it in the past. I know you're going to have an issue with it in the future. Okay. So I would write down my words and pay attention to that every single day. And here's why. Ego is the most destructive force inside of us. You would think it's hatred. Okay. But when you can control ego so that it is no longer relevant in your life, amazing things happen. You can be extremely authentic. Do I sound authentic to you?
Yes.
Guess I had to do a lot of work on my ego.
Yep.
Okay. So I'm constantly worried that all these things I'm doing, right? Okay, will spiral and I'll lose what? Control? I don't know. Lose myself? Yeah, probably. Disappoint Great Spirit, the baby Jesus? Yeah, I don't want to do that. So I needed to make sure that my ego was in check and I am in complete control, all right, and not my ego. And that's the path that, you were talking about folks that build these churches and suck up all the money and, right, get rid of their ego and things would change.
Right.
So for folks who are trying, like you and me, to move God's light, right, remember, our egos are the things that are going to trip us up. Don't answer this question. Don't answer this question. I'm not asking it. I'm not saying it for you to answer it. How much money do you make or plan to make on these podcasts? And would that be a conflict if you were teaching people like this about what we're doing, if you were to collect revenue from it? Is there any difference between that and the mediums you were talking about who charge $200 an hour? Interesting, puzzling questions, right? So remember to keep your ego in check. And when you're a person who's being fast-tracked with a lot of white light around them, okay, I would work on getting that ego into a compartment sooner rather than later. Because when people, in general, control their ego, the rest of their existence explodes.
I love that. I love that.
How much fun you having, Cameron?
Sorry?
How much fun you having?
I'm having a lot of fun, honestly. This is great. I enjoy this, and it's also difficult too, right? Like there are hard conversations to have when you don't know much about certain things, and you're trying to better understand what's even going on inside of yourself. And I think this is another part of this too. Is a lot of young folks, people in general, but a lot of young folks I'm having conversations with on a daily basis seem to be struggling with the same thing, trying to find, figure out what's going on, why we're here, purpose, etc. And so I think a lot of this is for me, it helps me and moves me in a certain direction in a very uncomfortable way, but it's like the uncomfortable work that needs to be done in order to grow.
So you're talking about finding the Christ within.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
So in part, that's what I had to do. Okay. I had to listen to all the churches. I had to listen to all the preachers. Okay. Right. And at the end of the day, all of it helped me connect with my Christ within. Okay. Now I'm going to add to that. It also helped me connect to Great Spirit. Okay. And all the things that I love about my faith on both the Christian side and my Native American side. Okay. And trust me, there's Native Americans out there that get pissed off at what I do. And I mean pissed off. Okay. Because they don't think, it doesn't matter. But again, it's coming from both sides. And there are Christians out there that come at me, or should I say, try to come at me. Okay. Oh my God, you're a sinner. You're this and that. Yeah, that's true. That's true. But because my ego isn't present, doesn't do much.
Right.
You follow me?
Yep.
So if you're going to stand there and take incoming, and if you're going to do battle with the darkness, pay attention to this, Cameron. If you're going to do battle with the darkness, you better be at peace with your inner Christ. Because at the end of the day, I stand in the light of Christ, and that is my first line of defense. I do a lot of other stuff, but my first defense is the light of Christ. Full stop. Okay? And if you're going to take me, you're going to have to go through Archangel Michael and a few other guys. Okay?
Preparing for spiritual battle is the next kind of thought that comes up in mind. And I've heard that a lot mentioned on podcasts as of late, preparing for spiritual battle.
Yes. Let me jump in there. I'm constantly preparing for spiritual battle. Okay. I was 2 days ago podcast.
Yep.
Okay. And something slipped in. Right. Next morning, my wife said there's something on the stairs. I'm like, fuck. Okay. How did it get through? I don't know, but it was a pretty interesting chunk of darkness. Okay. And I had to do what I do and reseal everything here.
Yep.
Okay. So, for me, I have to be constantly prepared for battle. Now, does that mean 24/7 like in the military? No, but build your den, put up your protection, and relax within. Okay, if you're gonna have a nice yard outside your house, you got to do the work.
Yeah.
You got to mow the grass, you got to fertilize or whatever you do to make grass grow. Right? Same thing. You've got to do the spiritual work. Okay, and for people that kind of dabble in what I do, right? Listen, go back to Fred Flintstone, because when you dabba-do, you're only looking for trouble. And then you end up calling up a guy like me and saying, I got something stuck to me. What do I do? Okay.
So don't dabble if you're going to do it.
Well,
do it
it's like I say, if you're going to play with a Ouija board, you better declare your intent. You better put your intention or your protections up. Okay. Again, it's all about intent, right? When somebody apologizes to me, I can tell you whether they mean it or not. Now, a lot of people can, you can kind of sense whether someone's just saying it and going through the words, but I know. Okay. So I learned a long time ago that if you're saying a prayer or if you're thanking God for something, right? How does he know you mean it? Right? Well, because it goes to intent. Does your soul mean what you're saying? Is it your intent to truly apologize? Well, that's a different energy than, yeah, I apologize. Okay? It's just a different energy. And I can see that and read it. Okay? Feel it, I should say.
Yeah. I really don't want to wrap up the conversation here because I do have a list of other questions, but I want to be very respectful of your time. So with that being said, is there anything that we did not cover that you would like to share with people that are listening in? Whether that is your books or any other items that we didn't discuss that we need to dive in or share more of before we part ways this evening.
Yeah, listen, if you liked listening to me, I've got some great books out there. Mysteries of the Wooden Men. This is a series. Book 1 is out. Book 2 is coming out. I wrote a book called A Date with Suicide. All right, this addresses why 50 plus veterans a day are killing themselves and the causes behind it and how do we solve that. And again, everything I write has a lot of spiritual stuff in it. Another book I wrote, a series. This is book 1, Steps to Crazy. Okay, this talks about my childhood and surviving abuse and overcoming some of the toughest stuff you'll ever read about. I've bumped into some people that have, had it tougher. Okay. And again, it's not a competition, but in this book right here, when I wrote this thing, it taught me a lesson about trauma, and it was a final lesson, if you will. Trauma in the end can only be evaluated and truly understood by the person suffering it. Now, let me qualify that. If you read my book or my books, and you realize that that people like me have spent lifetimes not talking about our past. Okay, and to prove that point, when this book was published, okay, I handed this to my wife. Right now, remember, with the wind chill, we've been married for 50 years. Okay, I handed her this book and said, "This is what I never told you." She sat down, read the book, didn't talk to me for days. Now when she finally could, she just cried. Now when she could get words out, she said, "You weren't abused. You were tortured." When she said that, I had to look back and say, wow, I think she's right. So I understand trauma, all right? And when I wrote this book, Date with Suicide, I tell a story of when I was in boot camp. Now, boot camp for me was a cakewalk, getting yelled at, marching straight, eating 3 meals a day, hot food, woo! I was in heaven-ish, okay? But I was bored. Boot camp to me was boring. I was also the master at arms, which meant I was in charge for half of the day when the company was in the barracks. Anyway, middle of the night, near 3 or 4 hours of sleep that you get, I get woken up by the roving watch, who says to me, "We got a problem." I'm like, fuck, all right. So I popped to, and one of the guys in the 80-man company broke his bick up and was slashing his wrists. Blood everywhere. Okay, you can't believe how much blood a human can spit out. And it's unbelievable. Now you think I'd be compassionate for this guy. This kid was from the Bronx, man. Tough kid. Tough as nails. But he couldn't take boot camp, right? Couldn't take it so badly he tried killing himself, or at least staging a suicide, right? Okay. Man, I hated that kid. Man, I was angry with that kid for one reason only. I had to deal with his mess. When I wrote this book, okay, Spirit World kind of, use some words of Paul Harvey, filled in the rest of the story, right? And it dawned on me that because of what I had gone through in my life, it prepared me for things like boot camp to be a walk in the park. But nobody prepared that kid for boot camp. And it was too much for him. And I realized that trauma can only truly be understood and solely understood by the person suffering it. Whatever my traumas are not yours, and whatever yours are not mine. I can only respect how it affects you. If I can help you with it, great. But it was a lesson in writing these books that has paid dividends in me understanding. And that's why I don't engage in politics or other things. Of course, I have my position, but I don't engage in it because it doesn't move the needle forward in getting God's light shining on as much darkness as we can.
That is the best way to put that. And I have not really heard many people say it like that. But I've been as it relates to politics and everything else going on in the world too, seems like a lot of noise that doesn't allow God's light to shine through. That blocks God's light.
You understand why?
From shining through.
Do you understand why?
Probably on purpose, but
we're in the spiritual war.
Right.
We're ass deep in it. Okay? Remember what the Bible says. And what will follow will be 1,000 years of peace. Okay?
Right.
Listen, I'm doing my part. I'm doing everything I can to build myself so that my light can continue to, attract darkness.
Right.
Right? It's crazy to say it that way, right? But the more darkness that, wants to call me out, the more I can call in the folks and do what Archangel Michael can do. And that's, remove it from, wherever we find it.
I love it. Well, D. Paul, I appreciate you coming on the Cameron Brown Show tonight and sharing all of this and diving into a number of different, what would be very tough questions for certain people to answer. But I appreciate you being so thorough with your responses. And I'm really excited to share this episode with a lot of folks to shine some.
Yeah, listen, if any of your viewers think I didn't answer a question, tell them to put it in the comments, and I'm happy to come back on and answer the question. It's just that I see so many things when I'm trying to answer your question. I go down these paths that just, it's what I'm seeing, I should say. So I want to answer the questions. I'm happy to answer the questions. Sometimes you just have to put them in a direct yes or no fashion so I can, answer it without taking a tangent.
Yeah. Well, my follow-up to that was going to be, I would love to have a follow-up podcast at some point in the future once we do go through and get those questions from certain individuals. And I, discuss it with folks in my inner circle as well and say, hey, what did you think about this podcast? What kind of questions do you have? We can certainly do a follow-up, which would be phenomenal. But for now, once again, really appreciate the time. Anything else that you want to share this evening before we part ways?
No, thank you for having me a guest. Have me back on, and get your viewers to put some comments in there and ask some questions. Tell your viewers to put out questions, and line up 10 or 20 questions and bring me back on. Happy to do it. But here's my thing: keep the faith, keep moving forward, baby.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for the time. We'll talk soon.